Here we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome, friends. Chris, I was thinking of maybe starting this one with maybe just a little bit of a somber story to start the episode. It has an important message. But let me start off. So my wife's grandmother, unfortunately, passed away last year. It was incredibly sad. She was one of
I'm
the
really sorry.
strongest. Yeah. She was one of the strongest people that I've ever met. Beautiful woman, born in the 1920s. She was 96 when she passed. And she lived an awesome life. She passed away while she was vacationing in Las Vegas. She loved to gamble. So it's kind of, I look to her like a hero. On her 96th birthday, just a few months earlier, I have video of her dancing to Whitney Houston. She's 96, dancing to Whitney Houston. And on her 95th birthday, I had the chance to interview her with like family, and it was like recorded. But I asked her what advice would she have for all the young people today, the kids today? And she said, when you're in trouble, don't sit by yourself. Ask for help. When you have a problem, tell someone. Don't stay in your corner. Ask for help. And I think that's brilliant advice. And Ronnie, if you're around, you are immortal, and thank you. But that's this episode of Why Does It Feel So Wrong to Be Human at Work? Why does it feel so wrong to ask for help, right? Why does it feel so wrong to stop and ask for directions? Chris, what's your relationship with asking for help here?
So yeah, it's interesting, and I feel for you and your family.
Thank you.
Always with going through things like this, it's always tough, but I think it's amazing that you and your family are also able to immortalize Ronnie with having some of these great life lessons and takeaways. But yeah, to your point about the whole idea of asking for directions, I was thinking about the trope of, men having a hard time asking for directions or asking for help. I always think about my own experiences and why it's just different for some reason. There's certain things that, society for so long has placed expectations on men to be competent or experts at. And so, for example, I think the last episode I might have talked about issues we're having at home. So this is another issue we had at home. And something goes wrong, I don't know why my wife Sydney thinks I'm an expert at things in the home.
Wait,
but
You're not?
I'm not. So
You're not?
I'm definitely a massive pretender in these areas. It was just this. It was our dryer machine. It didn't start. Like, you would turn the knob to twist around the timer, and then you press the button, and then should start. But like, it didn't start at all. And so she said, "Well, can you fix it?" And like, honestly, I know nothing about dryers. All I know is just clean out the lint thing so your house doesn't come on fire. But I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll take a look at it." Just true to form. Like, I did everything I could before I called like a handyman or anything like that, because like, it's just a weird, like, I just don't want to always have to do that. So I went on YouTube, and the instructional video was the exact same model as our dryer, and I found out that the knob itself had to be replaced. Like, there's some piece inside just had to be replaced. But I do feel that pressure all the time.
Did you fix it?
I did. Like,
Nice.
I couldn't fix it that day. I took a pair of pliers, and then I was able to turn the knob properly, so then it did start. So that was my first win with Sydney. She said, "You're amazing. How did you do that?" And I said, "I'm just a genius. I know how to do these things." And then
Wonder.
Oh yeah, I know. And then I just ordered online. I ordered the new knob, and then that came in, and then I replaced the old one with the new one, and now it just works like it's brand new. And so it's the lesson for me is that I guess you don't really have to be an expert in everything, and I guess that probably spills over in the workplace as well. Just because you're the boss, for example, doesn't mean that you have to be the expert in everything. But I think we probably all come across bosses that feel like they have to be looked at as, I'm the expert and authority on all things.
Oh my God, so true. Yes, it's such a great story and example. Like my wife Lori, she's the opposite. She runs into a problem, she'll just figure out how to do it, and I'll just never know about it until later. So everybody, welcome to this episode of Why Does It Feel So Wrong to Be Human at Work? This is a podcast where we Chris and I are like taking a magnifying glass to those like little imperceptible behaviors that altogether might slow us down. I'm Pinaki Kathiari. I always need help. I'll be happy to admit it. I own and run a digital communications agency called Local Wisdom, and I also co-founded a software company called Resource Hero. I'm here with Chris Lee, VP of Communications and Employee Experience at Gallagher. He gets to consult with like the top brands in the world and take their employee experience to new levels. So welcome. This episode is Why Does It Feel So Wrong to Ask for Help at Work? Let's talk about how this shows up at work. You already started this conversation as well. Like you talked about the fear of looking incompetent and this imposter syndrome that like managers might have, right? What if they know I'm a fake? You're not a fake.
When I think about what drives this in the workplace, this idea that you have to be looked at as invincible. And I think this extends not only to leaders, but obviously to employees as well. You don't like to put a spotlight on mistakes or things that you're supposed to know. Like I'm sure all of us have been in meetings where someone brings up something like maybe an acronym or something like that, and everyone's nodding except for you. And I just like, I don't want to look stupid by asking, what does this mean? What does that acronym stand for? And it's like, why does everyone else seem to know this except for me? Because you don't want to look, you honestly really don't want to look stupid. And you and I were talking just with Brielle not that long ago about like just your personal brand. And there's things that will affect your brand. And I think the not knowing about something that you feel like maybe that's something I should know, or maybe someone told me about it, I just didn't hear it. That's going to affect your brand, which will affect your ability to get a raise or to get that next promotion.
Yeah, exactly. And that brand is like based on what's around that brand, right? So there's like this culture dynamics that's at play, or and the workplace norms. Like maybe your workplace has like this emphasis on self-reliance, or this concept that like strong people don't ask for help. And so that exacerbates the issue. Even studies have shown that like when people are at equal status, there's more help seeking. So essentially adding authority and hierarchy into the mix actually deters people from looking and asking for help or asking that question.
I love some of the work that Brene Brown does in this space about how showcasing your vulnerability is a way to come across as more authentic and develop a stronger bond of trust, mutual trust between leader and employee.
What I really enjoy is unearthing those things and misconceptions in this world, right? Like just that, like you think that people are going to not like you if you have to be honest with the fact that you need help, but it's actually the opposite. They will feel more connected to you. And the truth is, people actually do love helping. They love feeling like this kind of like the feeling of saving the day. But similar to that, right, there's this kind of other fear or misconception that you're going to be burdening others. And it's a valid thing if you take it too far, of course. But this is also kind of like kindness that could turn into certain levels of weakness, right? People that like are often considering like the weight cost and the benefits, not only for themselves for asking for help, but the cost that the other person that they're asking for help from is going to take on. And so they have to kind of keep this in mind that it's like at some point, if you don't ask for help and things fall, everyone kind of pays. So be careful of that fear of burdening others. It's balanced there too.
And I'd love to hear your thoughts too, Pinaki, on what role does the leader play in fostering an environment where it makes it easier and much more open for people to admit that they don't know, even especially on things that maybe it's something you were supposed to know, but in the moment you might not have the answer right now. Like, how do you foster the conditions for people to be more candid and honest about what they know or don't know, or where they might need additional help?
Setting the mindset with everybody and yourself that needing help is inevitable, right? Like at some point we're as humans rely on each other and things around us to grow and lift each other up, right? So, be there for someone and, be open to have someone be there for you. So I think what you could do in an organization is just reframe help a little bit more. Collaboration, because like I was just saying earlier, if like one of us falls, like there's a whole domino effect that's going to happen, right? So recognize that and recognize that help is in fact collaboration. I think it's important that people feel safe, that they could ask not only for help, but ask for clarifying questions and encourage that, right? Because if one person has a misunderstanding, then the whole thing is going to fall. Football coach used to always say, if like one player on this team doesn't know what they're going to do on this play, the play is going to fail because they're so reliant on each other. And so we have to do that, right? And with that, you start seeing the benefits. It can improve a lot just by helping each other out. And it creates a good, safe place, and it fosters learning, and they know when to like judge. So we're trying to do things like removing fear from the scenario and things like that, right? Does that make sense? Do you have any other tips you would add on to that?
Not so much tips. Probably like a lot of people, I think I probably have a bit of a fear of failure as well. I definitely think I have lots of room for growth to be more willing to showcase my own vulnerability.
I've studied workload, and I know through my experience that even with like the best processes and efficiencies and trainings in place, once workload surpasses this certain threshold, errors will occur more frequently. So when you're under a high pressure environment where errors can't happen, when things go wrong, people don't want to admit it. They want to start blaming others instead of seeking to solve the problem and things like that. And that's kind of taking the problem solving somewhere else. It's like a more of a cover my ass problem solving rather than how do we solve this problem. So being able to pause and ask for help before it becomes a problem is really good, because individually we're limited, but together we're like limitless, right? We're unlimited. But there's so many stories of people getting like wound up into this. It is really sad that you feel trapped between the work and not being able to get help. It's really sad. I've heard like one too many stories of people breaking down and crying at work. These traumatic emotions shouldn't really be a part of our workplace, right? No one should have to cry at work or feel this immense amount of pressure.
I think that's part of the reason why you and I have these conversations, Saki, is to understand the human condition as it relates to our workplace environments. And I think there's lots of pressures that we face all the time that put us in an uncomfortable position of having to admit certain things, right? So people who are struggling with their mental health, someone that's struggling with depression, it's much, much harder to see because you just don't show it for the most part. You try to mask it over versus someone who's not struggling with mental health. They'll sort of look the same a lot of the time, right?
Yeah. They might not even know it themselves that they're going through it, which is a whole other kind of thing. If someone is asking me for help for anything like that, my best scenario would be that it's not in an emergency situation. It's like, it's coming up. This is coming up, Pinaki. This is about to happen. It's planned. We can do something about it before it's an emergency situation. So that's kind of like the first thing, right? I think even like studies show that like people who have like more negative beliefs about getting help are less likely to receive help from peers and supervisors, and they're more likely to have negative job attitudes and things like that. So it's like this is a cycle that you can kind of fall into. Right. So that's one thing that I definitely say in that side of the fence is to like know when to say when, know when to yell uncle, I guess. Right.
Yeah, and I think part of it is I'm reflecting back on, I was having a conversation with a consultant who's named Jacob Schneid. And he's developed or is in the midst of developing a program called Conversations That Matter. And it's a way for people managers to have conversations with their team members that go beyond just business as usual and just those sort of those lazy kind of conversations where it's like, hey, Pinaki, how's everything going? Good, great. Are we still on track to deliver this project for that client? So it's that same thing where, at the dinner table, if I ask the kids, how was school? What did you learn? We already know what the answers are going to be, and they're not satisfactory answers that lead to any kind of meaningful conversation, right? So the idea becomes more having a set of structured conversations is what this tool is meant to be, where you're asking more questions from employees about, Pinaki, give me an example of something that gave you the most joy last week, and what would it look like for us to give you more opportunities to chase that feeling, that flow state? Like what would it look like for us to set things up, and what are some of the blockers that get in your way of getting and staying in that flow state?
Where you're saying about the dinner table, like, how's your day today? I realize even at work, when I ask, yeah, how's your day today? People will default to is start telling me their to-do list and what they completed. I'm like, no, I was just asking you how your day was and like, what you're up to, not really the status update right now. So it's really funny in that way. Every now and then in my catch up, my one-on-one meetings with my direct reports, so you still like working here, right? I think from a management perspective, you need to know that because you want to hope for the best, but plan for the worst. So I think of redundancy like all the times. One of our values at my company is that no one is left alone. That means like if you need help or if you need to like bail or do something, there is someone that's going to back you up, right? It's like a game of chess, right? Like all of our pieces are either like on the front line, figure of speech. All other pieces on our team are like watching the other's backs. So if you kind of take one piece, someone is there ready to fill in that spot and whatnot. So I think that's important to think of redundancy and creating the space for when help is needed to be there in that way.
Yeah, we could almost do a full episode on some of the great practices you have in place at Local Wisdom with your team to allow people to be more human at work, right? And I think that's the idea. I think there are lots of fairly well-performing corporate cultures where constantly the eye is on the prize in terms of we work hard, we play hard, and then it's just like this constant hustle culture, but without understanding what the trade-off is in terms of important concepts like morale, and you might be setting up an environment where you make it harder and harder for people to put their hand up and say, I need a hand here. Like I'm struggling right now and this is just not working. Because when you're not doing that, that's where it can lead to bigger and bigger problems down the road.
There's also, though, a flip side to helping too much, right? I think when people become too dependent on you, it becomes a problem. We have kids, we have our parents as they get older and things like that. We have to help them, but we have to help them figure it out as well. Because if we're doing everything for our kids, they become too dependent and they'll have trouble gaining independence. And older folks, it's one of those scenarios where if you don't use it, you lose it, right? So they have to keep moving. They have to keep dancing, I suppose, or else you lose their ability to keep dancing. And it's counterintuitive in that way, right? Like I realized that my parents, at some point, they stopped listening to what their doctors were telling them when I was with them in the room. They would just stop paying attention, just thinking that I'm listening, so Pinaki's listening, so I don't have to listen. So this could stunt growth. And my parents, of course, deserve it from me. They raised me and did so much for me. Happy to take on that burden, but coworkers, kids and things like that, not so much, right? So we have to think about like giving up control and actually letting others do the work.
I like what you were saying, and it makes me think about how there's a switch at some point in life where we're very comfortable asking for help. So when we're kids, we're toddlers, we grow up, we're always asking our parents for help and for them to do things. And it's a very comfortable thing to do. And I think the idea is at some point there is a switch. And a lot of the times it happens the minute you start your working career. When you're in the beginning, when you're starting your job, it's part of it where you're constantly asking for help, but there is a switch at some point, and it's almost like we stop allowing ourselves that opportunity to play the I'm the new person card so I can ask for help. And now I've been here for 6 months. Now it's going to start to be weird if I ask for help, right? And so I wonder sometimes about that switch because it also gets in the way of us as employees being able to advocate for ourselves when you do need assistance.
And managers or who you work with can really influence that position, right? The scenario where it's not cool to ask for help, because even families are like that too, right? Like there's this machismo in guys and things like that sometimes, and you're not really allowed to ask for help. So it's something we learn along the way in our path to becoming independent. And our relationship with helping or getting help and helping others turns to be an interesting thing.
It's almost like the brand of asking for help. It's not a strong brand. It's looked on as something that is weakness, something that's just not an ideal state. I was thinking about AI, and I say it's still somewhat early days for a lot of people in adopting and embracing AI as part of the workflow. But one of the things that I sometimes hear about, and I don't know if you hear about this, is people talk about they feel a little bit guilty that they're having AI play a role in supporting the work that they do. We can't even ask tools and technology for help, how much more awkward is it for us to ask human beings for help?
And even from a management standpoint, if you see something that's not going in the way that you'd like it to go, your question is, should I intervene or should I not? We actually ended last season on failure, and failure is a better teacher than you are, no matter what. One story that I have for that is we have one of our senior sales folks, Julia. When she first started, she was working on a deal and a contract. What I typically do is when I send my scope of work out, I'd say, here's the scope of work. Let's set up some time to talk about it and, and take it through the motion. I just saw this on an email. She just sent an email saying, here's the attached scope. If you sign it, we could just start. And I started to panic there for a second. I was like, oh my God, like he kind of broke the process. And I was going to like reply all and like say, hey, let's set up some time. And then I just thought to myself, like, you know what? Just let it go. Let's just see what happens. And sure enough, the next day, he was like, hey, here's it signed. Let's go. And so it made me realize that me even jumping in, trying to do what I thought would help, would have actually not helped the situation. It would have caused it longer. So it's really interesting on both sides to really kind of understand and know when I should help and when not to help. And there's no absolute like clear answer that I know of. But I think the more you do it in both ways, the more you get better at it.
Right. And then I think part of that would require some intentional thinking around if I want to start creating a better environment of people being a little bit more vulnerable and be willing to ask for help, then maybe you have to be intentional about factoring that into everyday conversations, right? What is one thing that you've faced in this past week where you think you could use some help? I think it's always a scary question because you're going to get an answer and people are going to tell you, here's where I need some help, and you have to be prepared to deal with it. So like these employee engagement surveys, I think are only considered to be valuable if employees understand, yes, I have a voice. What are you prepared to do with this information? And that's where organizations have to be prepared to have an answer for that.
Yeah, you have to have that room for that unexpected, wow, I didn't see that coming, because it's just going to happen.
That about does it for this episode. You always have so many great stories and anecdotes. Is there anything else you wanted to get in before we look to wrap this up?
Seek help when you need it and give help. But at the same time, keep in mind you're learning and you're offering other people to learn and grow. Growth comes with struggle, and sometimes people do need to struggle. But at the same time, struggle leads to things breaking, and we don't want to get things broken.
And just before we get to our relatively new Wisdom That Feels So Right segment, we really close out this episode and all episodes now with different things, books, videos that, are making you and I a little bit smarter about these different topics. Pinaki, we do want to extend a special thanks to Local Wisdom, digital communication agency, for just believing in this idea, in this mission, and making this podcast possible. So let's get into Wisdom That Feels So Right. I touched on one, which was Brene Brown and the work that she's been really championing for some time now about the value of vulnerability.
I haven't read much books on this. The two things that I'll call out is one, therapy and helplines. Right now, we are in a place of a lot of change, and people could be going through some dark times, and it's better to talk about that. It's better to have a release for that than to kind of hold that in. So please do take care of yourselves and get help for yourselves, get help for people who need help. And the book I'd put out there for the Wisdom That Feels So Right is The Botany of Desire by Michael Pollan. It's not a business book at all. This one talks about the relationships that plants have with humans and how we actually both help each other out or need each other to survive, which is a very interesting thing. How plants actually control us in some kind of ways and whatnot.
When I was thinking about Wisdom That Feels So Right, I did a search on Google as well. And so full disclosure, I haven't read this book. I've never even heard of it. But there is a book by someone named Garrett Kaiser called Help, the Original Human Dilemma. And the description is like this book basically delves into the philosophical and psychological aspects of asking for help and examining why it is a fundamental yet often difficult human experience. And I would imagine some of the things that you and I have just chatted about, we'll find some of those flavors in this book. And I'm sure Malcolm Gladwell, in one of his many very interesting books, has probably addressed this as part of that as well. One of my favorite people in the world now is our producer, Brielle Saracini, who's your colleague there, Pinaki at Local Wisdom.
She is a saint.
She does amazing work, and I hate that she's not here in Toronto where I could hang out with her a lot more. And of course, I just really grateful for the great work that Vince Quinn, Taylor Cordatis, Bill Cornfield at SBX Productions does to help us put this all together. If you have been finding this episode valuable, or any of these conversations that Pinaki, you and I have, for all of you out there, just spread the word. Continue this conversation. Help us out as well by rating us, reviewing, sharing it with friends and colleagues. If there's any things that you hear that strike a chord with you, feel free to share it. And if you think it could spark some really interesting conversations, do it. So let's keep that conversation going. Thanks again so much for listening. To echo your point, Pinaki, please prioritize self-care, and also just make sure that whether it's in the workplace or in the human place, that you're giving yourself a chance to ask for help when you need it.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody.